Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. I am Brian Altunian, co-host, along with my friend and business partner, Shawn Francis. And today on our Just Two Dads podcast, we are going to be talking about vulnerability and trust, and especially how that affects families with special needs issues. So looking forward to having this conversation on Just Two Dads. It's such a catchy little tune, isn't it? I love that. Welcome back, everybody. Brian Altunian and Shawn Francis, Just Two Dads. We have a lot of conversations around a lot of subjects, primarily those that impact our special needs community. But we've found that everything that we talk about transcends the special needs community, the medically complex community, out to a broader population. So we welcome you. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, hello, please feel free to comment. We see the comments. Sometimes we'll post those comments up. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel, thank you. Hopefully we'll say something of value and you'll be able to share that. More importantly, if you'd like to subscribe, and that would be helpful for us as well. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, wherever podcasts can be heard, welcome, and hope that we bring some value to today. And to our family and friends down in the U.S. Virgin Islands on WSTX AM radio, hello. I almost said aloha, Shawn. I almost said aloha. That was crazy. Hello, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Great to see you. I'm feeling good today. Shawn Francis, how are you, my friend?
I am feeling pretty good. You know, it's funny. I was, trying to look for a reason to be thankful and blessed. And I think about it when you ask me as we begin the show, and I'm like, I'm feeling great. I'm thankful and blessed. Highly favored, all of those things. But in that moment, that's the truth. And sometimes earlier parts of the day, I may not have felt that way. But I think that kind of falls in line with our topic today. For those that don't know, our show began by us just having the notion that, there might be some value to the conversations that we have with each other as men and as dads to children with special needs that other people might get something out of. And as time, we realize that, as we like to say, there is no such thing as special needs. Everyone has the same needs. There's only human needs. Everyone needs to be heard, needs to be loved, needs to know that they matter. When you have a diagnosis or disability for someone that you for whom you are a caregiver, those things simply just go up. Or if you're the person that has the diagnosis, and one of those things happens to be the value of both trust and vulnerability. When you're a parent, you are a protector, fierce and foremost. When you are a parent to a child who has a disability, you are 10 times the protector. And quite frankly, many times, the line between protector and skeptic can be very, very blurred. And there's a handful of things that I went through early on with Elijah's diagnosis, experiencing, those things and having a very, very high regard for others' opinions of either myself, my wife and I, or the way in which we raise him. And again, that's just part of the human experience. And I've had some experiences of late that lead themselves to that, which we will get into in a bit. But I was going to ask you, because, and with all the things that we've talked about, Brian, I don't think I've ever asked you what, if any, situation you've dealt with regard to how others perceive you, or the choices that you and Jordan's mom made in raising her, or even now.
Well, first of all, I think it's an interesting subject, and I think that we all perceive some level of judgment from other people, right? We no matter what we're doing. I used to just professionally, I used to raise money for early stage companies and help those companies access capital to grow. In many cases, went out to the public market. And so investors make decisions based on the information given to them. Mm-hmm. And so on a professional level, I used to have people who put a lot of faith and trust in recommendations that I would make. And, in many cases, they resulted in very big financial wins for many investors. And the stock market is a stock market, so it's fickle. So it's interesting when somebody invests in a company out of trust and the company does well. It's like you're regarded as the hero. And by the way, I have no control over the stock price, right? Zero control over the stock price, but perceived as a hero. And then when the stock price tanks or goes down or drops for any reason, again, over which I have no control, investors used to be angry and upset. Again, in all cases, I had absolutely zero control over that. So trust has always been one of those things where, third party or outside folks put a lot of faith and trust in things that, that I had presented. It's funny, there's a lot of faith and trust when it works. And then, you could have 5 things in a row that work well. And then the first one that doesn't work as you projected, then all of a sudden it's as if the pre-existing trust is gone. And I think that's one of those things, right? Trust is something that you can gain or lose instantly, right? Challenges. So anyways, that's on a professional level. And your question was about, how we raised Jordan and what we did with Jordan. I don't really think I felt any judgment really around the kinds of decisions that we made for Jordan, because as her parents, we constantly were changing what we were doing. And primarily our goal with her was to get her educated and provide the right educational system to give her the biggest chance for success. And so, we kept moving her from school to school to school and school experience to figure out what was the thing that was going to enable her to succeed. Perhaps people judged us for making those kinds of changes on a regular basis, but I honestly don't really feel like it impinged or impeded our decision-making process at all. Also, Jordan's mother is very strong-willed and very headstrong. So I don't think anybody else's opinion would have really mattered to either of us at the time, right? But
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was done. I was going to say, but I want to hear your experience. So,
well, the one thing I thought of as you're saying that, because I'll go through, there's layers or steps, if you will, to my experience with the matter. And one of them that I dealt with that you probably avoided altogether is social media.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Well, Jordan's older, so it wasn't really
right.
there.
That's exactly what I mean. And so my first experience, there's a couple. So obviously, you and I met through our work in financial services. When I began in our business, I first saw, a mission to help families have access to that which is usually reserved for the wealthy, have it available to everyone, including the wealthy and the middle class. And when I saw that, I thought, if neurotypical families with neurotypical children need to know how to make the most out of their money, put it to work for them, need to know that there's places where they can put their money without any risk of losing it, not pay taxes on what they grow, plan for their future, and then have, special needs trust, all these things, in place, it's probably twice as important for the special needs community. Well, I was in the industry and the business for probably, I'm guessing, I don't know, maybe 6 years before I really began even sharing with anyone the idea of doing something like that. And a lot of it was not about the trust of others, but it was about me having a concern about how others would perceive me. Because my first thought was like, look, if I have just one person with me just sharing with them this great information, if they start to question my intention, I don't know if I could live with that. I really don't know, and then over time, and it took years, I realized, wait a minute, regardless of your faith or lack thereof, everyone can agree that it is said that Jesus had good intentions, right? And yet he was questioned to the point of death. And I'm a mere mortal, so why should I think that I should not be questioned? That was the very first thing too.
But be specific about that. So what do you mean when you said people were questioning your intention? Tell me what you specifically mean by that, so people can understand what that means.
Well, in terms of, for instance, the concepts and education and everything that I just referred to, right? With regard to financial instruments, right? Those things they're important. They're really important when it comes to, put it this way, for anyone that has a child, the preparation for the day when you exist only in memory. First of all, it's not an if, it's a when that time comes. So the importance of having a plan in place that even gives you benefits now is important. If the independence of that child is in question, then obviously it becomes 10 times more important. But even though that's a fact, my thought was still, if I'm not trying to sell any of those products or services to someone, just telling them about it, man, if they just, if for half a second they question my motive or something like that, I just don't know if I could deal with that. I just don't know. And so the first issue with those things was within myself, making sure that, I didn't worry anymore about something that had not occurred. That was the first thing. The next thing was, as I grew, being on social media, you just think about it now. I wonder how many of us have, can stop to think about when we first got on social media, were we always so free with, sharing our family and our adventures and our opinions and things like that? Because right now it's complete second nature. And over time, on more than one platform, I belong to different groups, support groups, special needs, autism support groups, and various kinds. And the other thing that I've seen in terms of people being really guarded, and first of all, let me back up. I had to accept that some people, in their attempt to protect themselves and or their loved one, are not going to be open to anything that you might have to say. And that doesn't matter what you're talking about. And so striking a balance between being open and still being guarded is a little bit, of a dance.
Yeah. So let me Jim, again, you and I have had many conversations about this. So I know, I know what you're talking about, but again, I'm asking for specifics of people who haven't heard the story before. I'll share an example I think that articulates what you're saying. I used to play basketball with a bunch of guys. We were over 50 years old, and we would get together and do it, on a Wednesday night, and we would, pick up game, and guys would, pick teams, and we would go and we would run. And most of the guys were out of shape. And one Wednesday night, we had one of the more popular guys who only shot 3-point shot, or only drove the line, only drove under the basket, right? And coming to the end of the game, down by 1 point, he shoots a 3-pointer, wins the game. He goes on, celebrates, has a great time, and walks over to the corner and falls over. And everybody was like, "All right, enough with the celebration," not realizing that he had actually had a medical emergency. They called the ambulance. The ambulance came. His 2 sons, who were teenagers, were playing with him that night. Everybody went to the hospital, and he passed away. He had a heart attack on the floor in front of all of the guys playing ball. And everybody was so shocked. And I put a note out to the entire group of guys that play ball, because, by the way, he had no life insurance. And I said, "Hey, everybody, this is a tragedy on many levels. Obviously on a personal level, and for those that were there to see it, how tragic that was, and in front of his kids, how horrible that was. But on a going forward basis, ongoingly, financially, it's a hardship now for the family. Didn't have it, and if this could happen to any of us over 50, so gosh, whatever you do, please put some life insurance in place." Now, to your point, I got pushback. People were like, "You opportunistic, blah 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 blah. Can't believe that you're taking advantage." I'm like, listen. Not taking advantage. While yes, I do sell products, right? I do sell life insurance as one of the financial services that I offer. But I said I'm willing to give any commission that I would make on a sale to the widow, for crying out loud. It's not about me making money. It's about me making sure that you're protected.
Yeah, go to a different company, for crying out loud. I'm just saying,
I don't care. Just get some protection in place, right? But that's kind of what you're talking about. Specifically, pushback, or like, "Oh, I can't believe you're being opportunistic," or "I can't believe you're taking advantage of your, the situation that you have a special needs child, and you're coming into this group and you're talking about these kinds of things." And Shawn, our producer Shawn Hall, put this awesome. I'm going to put it up here on the screen for those that can see it on video. And it's true. Like the road, there it is. I glitched out there for a second. The road to, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but there's a distinction between intentions and intent. If you come from a place of good intent, you can't be responsible for how other people receive that message.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's the one thing that I learned. And I know that that's specifically what you're talking about. God forbid anybody should give you pushback and say, hey, Shawn, come on, Shawn. You're trying to sell your wares here to this group that's here aligned for partnership and friendship and camaraderie and support. And that's what you're talking about specifically.
And it goes, you have to allow yourself to grow, and then you have to allow yourself to allow other people to be in the position that they're in and not judge them for it. For instance, when COVID hit and we began distance learning, my wife got this, there's a company called, you might be familiar with them, Lakeshore Learning. They sell supplies that, teachers buy and everything. So my wife got this, like a display, so to speak, and it's got different cards that fit in slots that talk about the day of the week, right? And it talks about, it's got the days of the week and it's got the schedule and everything. And I posted it just because I thought it was cool. And I also thought, hey, here's what my wife, and I think I even said that, hey, my wife is amazing. She found this great stuff for anybody that might need it. And it was in one of the autism groups. And the responses I got were, oh my gosh, that's cool. Where did she get it? I'd love to get that. That looks so great. And somebody said, looking at the schedule, they're like, I could never get up and eat breakfast that late. I'd be a wreck. And something else along those lines. And what I said was, I understand that no judgment, is being made by making a comment like that, but you have to be careful about your responses, because for me personally, I'm going to continue to share that which I think might enrich, enlighten, or help anybody else. But there might be somebody else that sees something like that and they're going to hold back from, sharing what they think might help people. So you might want to think about that, as you respond. And the person that posted it, kind of clarified, and everybody else was sort of like, yeah, you might, want to think about that. Now, if that was a couple years prior, I don't know that I would have had the wherewithal to respond that way. I don't know if I'm not sure what I would have done, but I wouldn't have necessarily done that. I would have either lit them up and, said a bunch of stuff, or, almost anything other than that. And I just think it's very interesting how we get in terms of our judgment and our intent to protect, and how skeptical we get about things too.
Yeah. And so this goes back to the original point that you started to make, which is, with the, now, especially because of the pandemic, where our socialization is all happening online. Not all of it, but the majority of it's happening online, and how social media has become so pervasive in our day to day, that the reality is it doesn't really matter what you put online. There's going to be somebody who's going to make a negative comment, or, the saying haters going to hate, or whatever. People are going to make comments. And this is not really new. Because again, when I was going back to my, my other profession of raising money, we used to have, people on message boards sit behind a keyboard and post things anonymously without using their real name that, were non-truths or untruths, were attacking and judgmental, and try to set off controversy, and can do that anonymously without having to put their name. I've never posted anything online or been involved. All social media, I'm listed by my name. I've never hidden behind an anonymous name, because I feel like that's a ooh, I almost use a bad word there. That's a chicken, that's just a chicken way of doing things, right? If you can sit behind a curtain and yell things at people and not be seen and identified, that's crappy, right? They're called trolls for a reason. The trolls are those little ugly guys who just sit under the bridge, right, and wreak havoc with people who are crossing the bridge. That's where it came from fairy tales. So cowardly. Thank you. That's the word, cowardly. I was thinking out the other chicken thing word, but thanks, Shawn. Cowardly is the word. But so here's the thing, right? What happens is you develop a thick skin, or, to your point, because you're much more magnanimous and you always take a higher road. You're like, I just don't know what that person's dealing with at the moment.
I try to
give that person give the benefit of the doubt, and honor the space there a little bit, and
Yeah.
and not let it ruin my day. But that's an evolved perspective. You weren't always like that.
No, and you know what made me really think about this topic too? I'm going to share something here that you're aware of, but I have not shared on social media, which is, and people will have different opinions about this as well. And
Disclaimer:
again,
no opinion.
This is, and everything on here is always about, here's what's worked for me.
Yeah.
Here's what I've done. Would
Right.
you like to know more?
Right.
And again,
It's
this is
our
one of
show.
those things. This
It's
is
our
one of those
show.
things.
We do what we want.
Yeah, that's it. This is one of those things though that relates to and applies to the general population, but just even more so when it comes to special needs. So there are people that most people are in one of two camps when it comes to the vaccine for COVID-19. All about it, all against it. And most people are very vocal about whichever side they're on. There's a smaller group, which is obviously in the minority, that feel either way and are not very vocal about it and respectful of other people's opinions, right? And so in our case, Elijah's diagnosis is autism, right? So depending on how you feel about what causes it or the relation between vaccines, you may decide, and I know some parents have, it's just my kid's not getting a vaccine, there's no way.
Yeah.
And my thought personally about that was just kind of on the fence, hadn't really thought of it. And then my wife came to me and told me one day, because he had said to her that he wanted to get the vaccine. And we were like, oh, she was pretty excited about it. I was like, okay. And I had to deal with a whole bunch of things because I was like, well, I hadn't really thought about it, like how I felt about it. And what happened is he had began to relate getting it with going back to school.
Interesting.
And he was tired of the distance learning, and he's when I want to go back to school. I want to go back to school. And when your kid asks for something and it's not from a bratty disposition, it's just like, please, 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 that really grabs at you.
Yeah.
Especially for something that for whatever reason you cannot provide. So started thinking about it. And again, I haven't shared this, but we decided, well, we're going to do that. And at the same time, and I think I might have shared this previously, he has not had a blood draw. So while he's fairly healthy, and everything as far as we don't know what, nutrients are missing or anything. So we wanted to, have a blood draw, just figure out where he's at as far as, from a nutritional standpoint. We visited a nutritionist and as well as his primary care physician and everything, just because, he's 15, that hasn't been done. You don't know what's missing. And then with a limited diet because of textures and sensitivities, you don't want to take anything for granted. So we had made several trips to the hospital to get it done. And we're telling him about it. And he's like, okay, well, and this is for the blood draw. And we must have made close to 10 trips. They were understanding. They knew he's on the spectrum. They know it's not an easy thing. Every time we'd go there, he'd be like, yes, okay. And got his sleeve rolled up and everything. Needle comes out, gets near him, and he's like, no. And he changes his mind. And we began by rewarding him by, taking him to his favorite, like bakery for a snack or whatever, for that idea of going. Because at first he was just kind of like, no. So we would do that. We try to replicate the activity at home so he knows what to expect, and it just never took place. So when the vaccine came about and he's the one just pushing for it, we're like, you know what, if he can get through that, then maybe he'll be open to the actual blood draw and we can see what's going on with his health. So we figured, okay, so there at a local college they have a drive-through clinic, so where it's just like a drive-through, pull up, you got your appointment and everything. They ask you the questions that they need to ask you, fill out a form, and they give you the vaccine right there. And as you know, with autism, what comes with it is a strictness as it relates to routine.
Yeah.
And through Elijah's growth and everything, he got to a point where he wanted, in seeing me go to work physically, he wanted to be like his dad. So he wanted a suit. So he ended up asking my wife for a suit. And he went to the website and everything, picked out the suit. And so she got it for him. And then we're at the point where he will go nowhere out of the house, even for a walk in the neighborhood, without wearing his black suit. And on one hand, it's great because it's progress and is beginning to care about the way he looks. On the other hand, you're trying to teach him about what's appropriate to wear. On one hand, you're like, I don't care, you're dressed sharp, and there's growth there. But on hot days and everything, he still wants to do that. So he still wanted to do that going to the drive-through the clinic. So we get there, he's got to take the jacket off, take off the tie, the whole 9 yards. And he, at this point, has seen that they're giving out stickers when you get the shot. So we go there on the first attempt, and he's trying, and it just doesn't work, right? It's not really happening. And one of the aides they got like 4 or 5 nurses that come around the car and everything. So it's kind of like us versus them. And I'm kind of telling them, you got to, be careful. And I'm trying to strike a balance between appreciating their effort to calm him down and at the same time protect him.
Right.
One of them kind of snuck up and grabbed his arm to just give it to him real quickly. And as soon as he felt the sharpness of it, he waved it off and knocked it to the ground. And most of the solution for the vaccine was still in the syringe. So, and when they looked at it, they're like, no, we didn't get it. Because I'm thinking that took place. And this is the part that was tough, is that he knows about progress enough to know that he made steps doing something that he hadn't done before. So he was like, I did it. High five, high five. And he's asking for the high five over and over again. I'm giving it to him. And then he's like, where's the sticker? Elijah will get a sticker. Where's my sticker? And obviously he couldn't get the sticker because he didn't get the shot. And it was just such a helpless feeling, wanting to reward your kid. And this part isn't about the vaccine. This is about protecting him. And he just kept saying over and over. And when it started to sink in that hadn't taken place, he was just so dejected. And then we realized, this is probably going to have to take place at a hospital in a different environment. We went to the hospital, and it takes a long time for him to get ready. Another thing with autism, he's got to put certain things in order. Everything's got to be turned a certain way. And, I'm talking about just stuff in the house. The windows turn a certain way, all this kind of stuff. This is what takes place on a daily basis when it's time to go out the door and go someplace.
Yep.
Right? It's a daily experience. And so when we get there, they explained to me, well, you were late for your appointment and it's technically canceled. I don't know what vaccines we have. If we have any left, then we can still get you in. And he's like, we're going next, right? We're going next. And he's saying this the whole time. Got a suit on, the mask, and the whole 9 yards. He's already made progress to get there. And I'm looking at the lady at the desk just saying, you got to find a way. I can't tell him that after all we went through to get here, that it's not going to work.
Right.
And eventually what she did tell me was, I'm sorry, we don't have any more for today's supply.
Wow.
And as I explained that to him, like, we're not going to be able to do it today. And he's like trying to be calm about it. And this is my growth for me too. He's trying to be calm, and he's okay. We get in the car, but as we're on the way, on the way home, it starts to hit him that it hasn't been done. And he has a meltdown. We come home, then he's kind of screaming and, upset. And this is the thing that you have to learn to understand too, for someone that's not familiar with autism. Just out in public, that looks like some kid that's not getting his way. It's not that. The sensory overload and everything is just, it affects everything. And he was just so upset.
Yeah.
And what we did is we scheduled an appointment before we left. When we went the next time, we made sure that we got there early and on time. And as we got there, he's telling them the same thing he said at the drive-through clinic, which is, he's like, Elijah will do it. I will do it. I was like, no, you can't take the needle and administer it yourself, And, I said, you want me to sit here and kind of hold you? He's like, no, you didn't want that. And then there was another nurse kind of walking up trying to help. And I had to tell her, no, just, kind of back up. And I said, look, here's what you're going to have to do. They're going to count to 3 and then do that. And I told them they're not going to do it while you're looking at me. And I'm looking at the one nurse telling her, like, don't do that. You're going to break trust here. And he sat there and he looked at it as it was done and did it the whole time. And
wow.
I had to kind of contain myself and not like jump up and down. I was so proud of him for overcoming that. And again, I probably don't need to say this, but this is not pro or anti-vax. This isn't saying this is why your kid should go get vaccinated. This is not what that is. This is about progress and steps. And he did that in the same, and I took pictures when it was done, and without a bunch of deep thought, I kind of just instinctively was like, you know what, I'm not going to post that. And that's not something I would usually do. I mean, I don't post everything, but I'm fairly transparent because I don't believe in posting about how I stubbed my toe this morning, unless I'm going to also share how I got over it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And too often we, all we do is vent and complain. And sometimes we need to do that too, but I like to be solution oriented and I want to inspire people. I try to say a prayer about what I post and that I hope this connects with somebody, but yet I didn't do that because I wasn't ready to post it and have somebody come at me for us making that choice, and it just so happened I was talking to a friend, told them about this a couple of days ago, and they have a child on the spectrum. And as I'm telling them everything I just shared, her response was, I'm getting chills hearing this. This is just so great. And this is someone who has a medical background, okay, and worked in immunology and is very aware of the fact that, there's commerce behind vaccinations. And that in case the commerce comes before the care. But yet they said that they were getting chills hearing the whole thing. And they said, you know what? After I told her that I didn't share it, she said, you need to, because, or not just you need to, but she said you should, because there's parents out there that will get something from that and need to be reminded again how much we are alike. And not that long ago, I wouldn't have given it as much thought. I would have went ahead and shared it. Now, I probably won't post the pictures, but I think that the story is worth knowing, and hopefully people are listening and connected in some way and not asleep. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's the vaccine, whether you take it or not, it's a very personal choice, and there's a lot out there, a lot of information out there that educates our decision. Some good information, some not good information, depending on the source. But it's a personal decision either way. We know the consequences of not getting the vaccination, and again, the reality is people have taken to social media to be very positional about things. And it's, I'm right. It's not just I'm right. You could also be right. It's I'm right and you're wrong. And, standing ground and stake in the ground and standing in their position. And so it makes it makes people two things. One is like to be thoughtful and think, well, maybe I don't want to endure the outcry or the backlash, so I'm not going to post it. And other people like, I don't care what anybody else says. This is my decision. I'm doing it and I'm posting. So look, I at the end of the day, there's value, in my opinion. There's value to sharing the experience, regardless of what people say, because people can have an opinion about anything anyways, right? And so then it becomes a question of how much do you share? And you and I have had this conversation about how much do you share on social media? Do you, boo? That's right. How much do you share on? Thanks, Shawn. How much do you share on social media about your children, and how much exposure to that? And as our children get older, now my older, well, actually all three of my kids are on social media. My youngest is going to be 14 next week. So my older girls are in their 20s. So where does it cross the line where you post something about them without their permission, right? And then you need their permission on that question. We should talk about that a little bit too. Gabby always comments when I post stuff. She's like, no matter which of the three kids I post something, and Gabby's like, oh, there you're doing your dad thing again. You're picking the worst possible picture of us to post, right? It's not, I'm just possibly just a bad picture taker. And so I only have bad pictures on my camera. But but it's funny because at some point, the question is, where's the permission, lie? And as parents, I know you guys have had the conversation about how much information you share about your children and the dangers of posting stuff on social media and, the exposures to, people on social media. Again, listen, when I was a public company CEO, my personal information, like my home address and phone numbers, was available. You could look through SEC filings and find personal addresses and stuff. And, sometimes that's a scary thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If people knew exactly, Jeff Bezos' address or Michael Dell or, Bill Gates, if they knew their personal home address and could get to it, right? That creates a vulnerability, which for those of us who don't have a big celebrity following or a big, a big following, it's not really much of an issue, but I know it does come up. And so this, again, is where vulnerability comes in, because our children who have special needs issues may not be able to articulate their desire to be included or not included in your social media posts. I don't know if you want to talk about that today or not, but it just goes back to that same question of, where do you draw the line? And I'll just say this, and then we'll go back to this other point. In my opinion, I think there's a difference between having a specific reason to want to share your information on social media. There's a difference between that and having no reason. Just going to post stuff because I just want to post stuff, right? Most of the time when you don't have a specific agenda, it's like, hey, look what I'm doing. Hey, look what I'm doing. It's sort of like, give me attention. In our case, we share what we're doing because we have a community of which we're members and of which we are trying to provide, a sense of community and togetherness and enlightenment and shared experiences so that people don't feel alone. And so I think of things when I post stuff on social media as sharing my life, sharing activities, sharing events that go on with my family, things in our business, because I've had on many, many occasions when I do business with somebody, I'm sitting across the table and they're like, I feel like I know you. I feel like I know you from following you on Facebook or following you on Instagram or
right. Absolutely.
And that connectedness and that relatedness is a significant piece of our financial services business. So I want people to feel like they know me, they trust me, I'm a family man, I'm committed to having people win and be successful. So in a way, I have an agenda, and it's not an underhanded agenda. My agenda is just, I'm just sharing, period. The good and the bad, the ugly, tend to put more good than bad, right? Just because. Right. But I share because I want people to know that I'm a real person, right? I'm not doing it for attention. I'm not doing it like, oh, here's my salad that I had tonight. And, I take pictures and take video of stuff all the time. I don't post everything that I do, but I post stuff that I do. I want people to know that I'm a real person. Right. And so when we do that and we share things that could be controversial, hey, I voted, right? Or, hey, I got vaccinated or whatever that is, we know that people are going to be positional about stuff. And we just have to be able to know that we can't be responsible for how people, in my opinion, can't be responsible for how somebody perceives that information. And if they go online and anonymously troll, it says more about them than it does about us, in my opinion.
Completely.
So I know I ran over a whole bunch of things there, and I know you want to respond to a bunch of that. But
well, I also think that, again, we have to allow people to be where they are and continue to grow ourselves. There's someone that we know that on their page, on their social media, I stopped following the person. And on their page, on their profile page, the picture, the frame was, because there's these picture frames that'll say vaccinated, I got vaccinated or whatever.
Right.
There's some that actually say, I don't care if you got vaccinated. And I just feel like,
well, that could mean a whole bunch of things, though, if you think about it.
Why is that necessary?
Yeah.
If you feel like, hey, that's your business, you got vaccinated, I don't need to know that. You don't need to know that, but you also don't need to follow that person. That's their page. And so for me, I didn't understand it. But rather than really get bothered by it or question the person on it, and it was really the ice that, the straw that broke the camel's back for me, because there were a bunch of other things. And I'm not sure if I want to exchange energy with that person. So I really don't even remember if I just stopped following them, unfriended them. I don't know what I did. All I know is that the things that are on their feed, I don't see. And, I think that, you can also have a tendency to start asking that person, well, why did you do this? Or, why that? And I think when a special needs parent posts something, especially something that's traumatic or heavy and challenging to go through, and they begin the post with, please, no judgment. We live in a world where that's necessary. And now that I will respond to, especially if I see that people are still kind of piling on the person, which is, well, you should know better because of this. And you just don't know what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes. And I think that sometimes in our attempt to, in our conscious attempt to be protector, we become skeptical. But then also, and I'm not a therapist by any means, but I do think that in an attempt to deal with our own whatevers, we get pleasure, in lashing out at somebody else's choices, whatever have you. And that's not what a support group is supposed to be, about. I just think it's a very interesting phenomenon, if you will. I shouldn't say phenomenon because it's part of the human experience, but within the special needs community, those things take place. And I get it. Like, for instance, if for someone that just seems like I don't know, maybe they can't handle their child or they're making poor choices, there's far more power in wondering why they do that, really wondering, as opposed to just questioning out loud, who the heck would do that? That's so stupid, and when we do too often, we do more of the latter than the former.
It's funny. I'm looking this up because I did this earlier this week. Mm-hmm. I was looking up quotes from Aristotle. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I don't know why. Here it is. This is the quote that I got this week, which I love. I mean, there are many quotes from Aristotle and Socrates, but it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. That's one. Mm-hmm. There's another one that he says, and I don't have it specifically in front of me, but an educated mind allows you to have a thought and and entertain a competing thought at the same time.
Right.
So, right. What we have found is, and again, I'm not knocking education or lack of education but what I find, and I take the humble position that whenever we're dealing with a position of potential controversy, I don't know enough about. I always say I don't know enough about it to make a complete decision about it. I will say this from what I know. This is what I believe, but I'm also open to hearing alternative thoughts. We have a very close friend who we are on the opposite ends of the political spectrum, and we have conversations all the time. And sometimes he likes to bait me and say, well, so what do you think about this? Let's talk about critical race theory. I'm saying, you know what? I'm going to just say right now, I'm not educated enough to know specifically all of the points. I have an opinion, but since you brought it up, why don't you tell me your thoughts? And I take a position where I listen, openly, and I don't make a judgment because people make their decisions on influx of information is coming from a whole bunch of different sources. So my perspective is always, I'm always open to learning more. I'm always open to looking at the opposite side of the conversation. And I think that that's missing. I mean, I'm not putting myself above everybody else, but I think that we have found lately our discourse in this country, and probably on a much larger scale, because I don't think it's just held here in the United States. I think it's everywhere, where people are making decisions on certain things and then making judgments on anybody else who doesn't agree with that point of view. We're creating massive polarization. It happens in Israel. It's happened in England. We've seen this. It's happening in Australia. Like it's happening in Canada. Like it's happening in so many places now around the world that the discourse has become very confrontational. And a lot of it is, based on input from one source or a limited amount of sources. And so people are making decisions about what's good. And my perspective is always, it's up to the individual to figure out what's good for them. what's good for me is good for me. And if you decide that something different is good for you, man, more power to you. That's greatest part about, freedom of, free will is being able to make a decision for yourself of what you want to do, what's best for you. Do what you do, Shawn said, you do you, boo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, really, really, most definitely. And I just, that's why I think that the study of human beings and human behavior is something that will always tend to fascinate. I always say that we're the strangest beings on the planet. It's funny because ABA, which the B in that treatment stands for behavior, and it made me stop and think about how we behave as human beings altogether, because we're at the top of the food chain, but we have the strangest behavior. A bird wants to get from point A to point B, it's going to fly. If a dog likes you, it's going to wag its tail or lick you. If it doesn't, it's going to bark or bite. But a human being is like, I want to be treated with kindness and I want to be treated with respect, but I'm not going to treat you that way. I want to not wonder where my next meal is coming from, but I may not work, or I want to be in shape, but I'm not going to work out. We're amazing, especially in the way in which we treat each other. Now the world isn't a dark, lonely place, because that's not how everybody operates, but it would most definitely be a better place if some of the things we've talked about, were adopted. And again, that's not because we are perfect, therefore you should be like us. No, because I think I can speak for you safely when I say that, we are a work in progress. But if this is what's worked so far, then, and you know what? I take cues from our children, neurotypical and otherwise. I think there's just so much to learn there, and we need to be as supportive of each other as we possibly can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like Shawn's comment, lead with love and you can't go wrong. And I agree with that. I think, again, when we, to your point, if we are exercising our right, the trade-off of that is allowing other people to exercise their rights, right? Mm-hmm. You can't say, I'm going to exercise my right and restrict your right.
Right.
And oftentimes I will say, without getting completely political, but some of the challenges that we have on the political landscape right now is I'm going to make a judgment that restricts your right to do certain things. And it's often made by people who, again, they have the freedom of that right, and then they're trying to restrict it for other folks. And so that's the challenge that I see in the political landscape. We've got people saying, hey, I'm going to do this, but you can't. I want it this way, but you can't. It seems, and again, both sides of the political spectrum are guilty of this kind of activity. So it's not one side versus the other. But I think just going back to the original, conversation that we've been having as we talk about decisions that we're making, and we as parents of special needs children, I think we feel vulnerable anyways, because we have a situation that generally smashed our ideal picture of what our life was going to look like prior to the birth or prior to the diagnosis of our child's experience. And now it's different, and we had no control over that. And the lack of control leads to a massive amount of vulnerability. Like, I can't control this, so how could I control the rest of it? Or what do I do? What's the rest of my life going to look like, right? And that, while we all have that tendency to go, I don't know what the future is going to look like. We don't know what the future is going to look like. But when you have a child with special needs, those things that you thought you could kind of count on kind of go out the window. And there's a whole new world that's kind of being designed as you go. The challenges that you have with Elijah now at 15, you're going to have other challenges as he gets older, as he turns 18, and then the transition period, and then living on his own and work in the future there. As you get older, because we all know you're really old, Shawn, and so I'm kidding. Anybody who sees
right
Shawn,
there with you,
anybody who sees Shawn, you're like, dude, that guy looks so young, it's crazy. I thought Shawn was in his 30s and was surprised to know how old he was. He's almost as old as me, but But that happens, right? So our future is like what happens in the future, right? And we feel particularly vulnerable when it comes to our children with special needs. So there's it's already baked into our anxiety. It's baked into our mindset. Like we already have come from a place of vulnerability. Now expose yourself to things like social media and other things, and it seems to be particularly pointed attacks feel like they just continue to knock the little bit of foundation that we have.
Yeah.
And I would say, easy for me to say, I would say, and you and I have had this conversation, I would say, fly in the face of it and do it anyways, right? Because if you come from a place of love and you come from a place of caring and you come from a place of making a difference in the lives of people around you, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
It's all that matters, right? And we can be scared and we can be nervous and we can be, frightened by the future, but we can step out in the street and get hit by a car. We could be in our condo, as we were those folks in Florida, asleep in the middle of the night and have the condo collapse. Like anything can happen. And so the reality is we don't really have control over a lot of things. So those things that we do have control over, they come from, and if they come truly from a place of love, honor, respect, sharing your experience and creating community, then it's always there's always positive to come out of it. And you'll have more people who appreciate that, feel connected, feel seen, feel heard, and feel related than those that don't. And honestly, those that attack that are usually those that don't feel related. And that's the challenge, right? Our goal, I think, in life, and this is a great way to, as we come towards the end of our hour, I always say empathy and love is needed more now than ever. That's what we're talking about. If you can come from a place of empathy and love, judgment doesn't fit in that. Judgment doesn't exist there. You can be vulnerable and share with love. You can be and know that other people feel that way. I'm going to tell you, Shawn, the things that you share here, besides those that you share with me, individually, but those comments that you share, the things that you share here on our podcast are always impactful for those who have the benefit of listening and or watching, and or hearing. Every time you share something, you're sharing a piece of yourself, which is a very vulnerable place for you to be. And I know that it resonates with people. So my outside opinion is keep doing what you're doing. And I know that you are going to anyways, but do what you do and don't not do it because you're afraid of, somebody taking a pot shot. And I know that you're not doing that necessarily, but I'm just saying,
right.
Nobody should restrict their activity or their share or what they're doing because they're afraid of taking a shot. And in fact, we find no matter who it is, when they share an element of vulnerability, we feel closer to that person, whether we're watching them on TV or on a movie screen or whatever, or at a podium somewhere. When somebody of significance shares an element of vulnerability, we feel connected, we feel related, and we don't feel alone. And at the end of the day, that's what this podcast is all about, is creating a sense of community. So
right. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I appreciate that reminder, because my whole thought was just like, I'll let it come to me in terms of what you do and don't share. What I will say is, for anybody out there that's listening, as we wrap up, if you first of all accept that if you're going to dare to do anything worthwhile for anybody else, right? You cannot control. Not only can you not control how people receive what you have, but regardless of your intention, there are people that are going to question it. So love anyway, do it anyway, and understand that that's the only thing you're responsible for is the message, is the action. The reception has nothing to do with you whatsoever. And it's another topic altogether, which we're going to get into at some point. But for those of us that, when you become a parent or caregiver to someone with special needs, there's a certain amount of yourself that you lose. The life that was to be is lost because, you have a vision of how things are going to be. None of that takes place. So you kind of lose yourself. So for anybody that's trying to think of, can I start a business or do something that allows me to make money on my time? Can I find a calling that I can still pursue? Whatever that thing is, don't give up on that. And be who you are, do you, and go ahead and give love.
I love it. I love it. It reminds me, what you just said reminds me of that quote, "Your opinion is none of my business."
That's right. That's exactly right. That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And as we get ready to, to close out, I want to encourage everyone. You'll be hearing more as the time, goes on. We talked about planning a 2-day event where we have sort of a summit that we take a greater step in helping to construct a bridge between the lives that people have and the one that they want. Save the dates of September 17th and 18th. That's a Friday and a Saturday. The dates we have locked in, right? But we're going to be touching on, obviously, closing out the events with the financial service, education, and opportunity that we provide for the special needs community. But we have people that will be discussing how to prepare for and make sure you're getting what you should be getting out of an IEP, estate planning, nutrition, life coaching for special needs families. How do you find that purpose that may have been lost? And we haven't even finished finalizing the guest of presenters yet, because we want to make sure that we can add as much value as we possibly can. So make sure that you save that date. It'll be virtual, it'll be online, and we'd love to have you join us. With that said, Brian, I appreciate you and this platform and the opportunity for us to be able to do what we do and touch the lives that we even try to touch. Everybody just remember, what there really is just human needs, not special needs. Everybody needs to know that they're loved. Everybody needs to know that they're seen, that they're heard, and that they matter. And somebody out there needs to know that you care about them. And as always, I want to make sure that I thank the women in my life, most prominent ones, not including my daughters, but my mom, Jan, and my wife, Laura, without whom I could not even begin to attempt to be who I hope to be and who I have grown to be thus far.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We'll see you again in our next episode of Just Two Dads.
Thanks.